That's good stuff. All right, hey, I'm going to go back to the book here. Taking turns, they carried the big PRC-77 Scrambler radio. And interestingly, if you remember when Andy Stumpf was just on and we were talking about being new guys in the SEAL teams, in the 90s, we were still carrying the PRC-77 in our training operations, which is pretty crazy.
We carried it in buds.
There you go.
We did it for our comm shots in buds.
Taking turns, they carried the big PRC-77 Scrambler radio, which weighed 30 pounds with its battery. They shared the weight of memory. They took up what others could no longer bear. Often, they carried each other, the wounded or weak. They carried infections. They carried chess sets, basketballs, Vietnamese English dictionaries, insignias of rank, bronze stars and purple hearts, plastic cards imprinted with the code of conduct. They carried diseases, among them malaria and dysentery. They carried lice and ringworm and leeches and paddy algae and various rots and molds. They carried the land itself, Vietnam, the place, the soil. A powdery orange-red dust that covered their boots and fatigues and faces. They carried the sky, the whole atmosphere. They carried it, the humidity, the monsoons, the stink of fungus and decay, all of it. They carried gravity. What a great description. I mean, that's just, and that's why, like I said, even though this book is, part fiction and a blend of truth and fiction, that clearly is written by someone that was on the ground in Vietnam. And there's a lot of similarities between that environment and the land itself and the atmosphere in Ramadi. What do you think of when you think of the atmosphere and the land in Ramadi?
Just listen to that. I mean, it just takes me right back there. No one could have been able to write that unless they'd been there. Unless they'd been a part of that, what that was like for us. And the first thing I remember about being in Ramadi is just the stench. There was always the stench of something burning. Always the stench of something burning. And whether it was civilians burning trash, because there's no trash pickup in this total war zone city, and you see these giant trash piles everywhere. And certainly there was the stench of that garbage all the time. But so they'd be burning trash, and a lot of the burning was a burning vehicle in the street that got IED'd. That was an explosion that went off. That was a building that was on fire because the tanks hit it with a main gun round. Or the bad guys had driven a truck bomb into a position and just smoke in the air. And I remember that stench of burning. And I remember the stench of the trash, the garbage, and sewage, raw sewage. That was always a stench as well. And that kind of takes me back there. And the kind of haze in the air that you get, that kind of Iraqi haze.
It's kind of like all those smells that you talk about. It's kind of like war is hanging in the air because it's fire and it's gunpowder and it's trash, and it's like that smell is war in my mind. If I smelled that smell, I'd think we were at war right now.
That sometimes sometimes you'll smell a similar smell or things like that. It'll just kind of take me right back to being in that environment. The stench I think is of that, but it was also a stench that we loved as well, because this is what we dreamed about our whole life. And I remember Tony and I talking about that, this is where we wanted to be, right? I mean, people in TU Bruiser, our boys were ready to get after it and be a part of that. And where else would we want to be than in that incredibly difficult environment, this most dangerous battlefield. And we wanted to be a part of that. So it stunk, but it was a good.
Bro, I remember the first big operation we did in the Mulab, and I'm rolling in there and it's dark, and we kind of turn this main corner, and as soon as we turn this main corner, there's tires in the street on fire, and so I could smell it before, but I was like, what is that? Well, am I smelling burning tires? And sure enough, we turn the corner and it screws up your night vision goggles because now they're getting all bled out by the bright light. And then as the sun's coming up a little bit, you see the dark smoke. And I remember that to me, I don't know why, but that to me was the switch in my mind because that was the first, because in my first big operation, that was the first thing that I said to myself, those are the bad guys. The bad guys did that. They're here. They were just there. It was like my first moment of saying that. And it's also very distracting and hard to see and all that other stuff. And I remember when I was running training and we would do mount scenarios, one of my big things, I'd say, all right, guys, how many tires are you going to put out to burn? And I remember one time someone's like, we're not going to do the tires tonight. And I said, no, we're doing the tires tonight. Always set tires on fire. Let that be known because it screws things up. And I think it was just my own personal desire to be taken back to that place like you were just talking about.
Well, I remember those mount scenarios and going out there with you. When you were running that training when I was an operations officer and executive officer at a SEAL team, and it took me right back there.
Oh yeah,
it took me the smell, the stench. We'd hear the call, the prayer, comes out, and you'd see the graffitied walls, and it was so much like that, and it was awesome.
When you put your night vision on out in when we really got after it with the mount training facility and really did everything we could to simulate what the guys were going to experience, man, you couldn't tell actually. If you got transplanted, you wouldn't be able, because we did because in Ramadi all the electrical wires were all knocked down, so we'd string these crazy wires up just randomly in the streets to make it look, because guess what, you'd be running and you get caught up in this wire. And you got to make sure it's not an IED. So you can't just pull, it's all these little things to simulate as best you can. But
thank God you didn't have the rivers of raw sewage running through the streets.
Yeah.
Sometimes every once in a while our guys would slip and fall down into, which was just horrible.
I had one of my first deployment. This guy was walking, and I don't know what this was, but we were just walking, and all of a sudden he walked and he fell through. It was like there was a hardened shell. And he fell through this hardened shell right into a sewage pit, and I was, because I don't know what the shell was made of, but we know what was under it. It was nasty.
There was a big metal pipe across what you remember we called it Shit Creek. That was actually the official name on the map.
Yeah,
because it was literally like a creek of raw sewage, and there was a big metal pipe, and we often patrolled across this pipe. It was the one where you didn't have to jump it; you could actually just walk across. And later, actually, some of the Army guys had burned the grass out there, and there were IEDs all around it. We didn't even know we're there when we first patrolled in. But one guy was with us. He slipped off the pipe and fell into Shit Creek, and now he's got to be in that uniform for the next 24 hours.
It's only a 48-hour operation. Don't worry about it.
No shower, no shower for a good 24, 48 hours. That's good times right there. Man. I think the one thing missing too from that we couldn't recreate in that mount scenario that you were running. It was so awesome, but the heat. Like the heat was overwhelming, and I think that's what really got guys, even guys that were in really good shape, who were great athletes. If you weren't acclimatized to that, it just didn't matter until you really got acclimatized. It would crush you, and I remember that going in. Even like I said, at nighttime it's still like 95 degrees outside, and when the sun's coming up, there'd be a little bit of breeze, kind of in the early morning. You get a little bit of coolness, and we're talking it's like high 90s, right? But it's going to hit 117, for the high that day, and you're sitting on the rooftop, and my rucksack is still covered with tar, where the tar starts creeping out of the rooftop and just melting into your bag and sticking onto your weapon and your gear and your uniforms.
Now I sweat a lot, like I sweat a lot as a person. I remember one time, and it wasn't when we did Cop Falcon the first time, but it wasn't when they had air conditioning in there yet. It was like in one of those between ops, and I was down there. You guys went out. You guys were working, and I was in there Cop Falcon, and I had come down in a Bradley or in a Humvee. Bradleys are hot. Humvees, they're both hot. But then I got in the building, and I was coordinating with the company commander, and I'm sitting there, and now I haven't been doing anything physical In fact, I think I was inside with my gear off, just with my body armor on, but I'm just sitting there, and I'm sitting there like looking at a battle map, and it's just me. No one's with me. I'm just looking at the battle map. I think I'm trying talking to you. You're probably heading out in the city, and you're going somewhere, and I'm looking at where you are, and there is a stream of sweat. I'm not doing anything. I'm just literally sitting, looking at a map, and there is a tick, 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 tick of sweat coming off of my nose onto the battle map, and I thought to myself, bro, it's hot. It is hot here.
Well, and you were in the shade then, and
no, this was at night.
Oh, you were at nighttime.
Like we came down at night. You guys inserted, and I was just sitting there. So I'd been sitting there and that's one thing that I always know. This is the hottest time of day in the desert is when the sun goes down. I don't know if this is a true physics thing. If you're a scientist and you want to come back at me with the facts, maybe I'm wrong. But let me tell you what it feels like. And I say this. The heat comes out of the ground. So all that sun's been beating down on the ground all day. The heat comes out of the ground, and then the wind stops. And so it's just, that is the hottest time. It's true here in the Southern California desert, and it was true in Iraq. That the hottest few hours was after the sun goes down. Like the next 2 to 3 hours is the worst.
Absolutely brutal. On that same operation, I remember we were running out of water. Because we were out, we had moved out 300 yards or so down the street and set up in that big 4-story apartment building, and we were running out of water. So we had to do. So I remember we were doing a daytime. I was like, we grabbed a couple guys. We had a stretcher. We have a foldable like Israeli stretcher that we open up, and me and 3 other guys are sprinting down the street because we know there's snipers out here. I mean, we're right in the, we're outside the perimeter, and we're running back to where you were at the Cop Falcon, and we loaded up a bunch of case of water and some MREs, and then we're sprinting back. And I remember getting back from that, and that we did that at it's probably like 2:00 in the afternoon, and it's literally like 117, 120 degrees. And I was, of course, we had all our gear on, and we're doing this 300-yard sprint carrying a stretcher that probably weighs like 150 pounds. We were bringing enough water for like 20 guys, and and food, and it was. I don't think I look like I just got out of the shower
for sure,
just sweating
completely
through all your gear, and a lot of our eye pro. There was the requirement you had to wear eye pro. Eye protection, so either like ballistic glasses or and what guys had been wearing previously was the goggles that you wear to protect your eyes. You couldn't wear it because if you had it on, it would be completely fogged up and you couldn't see 10 feet in front of you. And it was like, okay, I can protect my eyes, or I can like get shot and killed or trip over something and not be able to get where I need to go.
Yeah. And because you would be completely blinded by the fog.
And nothing where we try to get the high speed ones with like the little
the fans.
The fan inside.
What's about high tech? Here's some high tech Echo. We got these goggles that had little miniature fans in them to blow fresh air in there. They
didn't
suck
work at all.
Yeah.
Everything sucks. Nothing works.
Like windshield wipers, those ones.
That's what you needed.
Something.
That was another little TU Bruiser saying. Everything sucks, nothing works. Because someone would say like, "Hey man, hey, this thing's not working." I'd be like, "Yeah, everything sucks, nothing works. Deal with it."
Exactly.
It's like, everything sucks, nothing works. Next, we know that it's a given. Everything sucks, nothing works.
BTF.
Yeah, BTF.
BTF.
And actually, we talked about the heat, but we didn't talk about is the damn moon dust. Because he's talking about they had orange-red dust. The moon dust in Ramadi was nasty and gnarly, and it was everywhere. I remember specifically Corregidor was completely covered, which was the camp on the eastern side of Ramadi, where the first of the 506 was there, and then we had a detachment of SEALs there. And when you'd go over there, it was every step you took, there was a even trails that were getting walked on all day to the head or to the chow hall, those trails that were walked on every single day, it didn't matter. Every time you took a step, there's a little cloud burst of this moon dust, this fine moon dust that covered everything, and it was all over the city too.
It was like talcum powder, and it was those tanks would come in, they'd crunch up the concrete. So even if it had been previously paved, now you got sand, dirt, and it just, I remember it getting in everything. So we park our vehicles. I remember, in particular at Combat Outpost Grant, right in the heart of just South Central Ramadi, and it was patrolling out of there. You were in like knee-deep moon dust. So, now, and we're patrolling out into a sniper overwatch position, moving out at nighttime, and not only is it dusty and getting all over stuff, it gets in your weapons, and you have to constantly clean them, but I remember we'd get to where we were going, get in an overwatch position, and you'd often have to take your boots off and just dump out like a pound of sand of that moon dust that had gotten inside your boots, that it got in through the little holes in your
little
tiny
holes on your jungle boots.
Wait, what is moon dust though? Just it's the dust that happens.
It's this fine. It's like Leif said, it's like talcum powder, but it's dirt. It's some kind of fine sand. Again, I'm sure there's some scientist that's going to say that what it specifically is, but as far as I'm concerned, it's moon dust. That's where it came from.
But this isn't. We're not talking about like on the beach, in Hawaii.
Right,
we're talking. This is like if you walk through this stuff, it's all over you. It gets everywhere. There's literally walking through it, and there's like a cloud of dust coming behind you. It's just so fine.
And when a vehicle would drive by, when a vehicle would drive by, same thing. It'd be just you'd be walking, and you're just breathing this moon dust in. It's nasty.
You blow your nose, and it's just
it's
like,
brown. It's the color of the moon dust. It's wet.
Dirt.
Yeah, like when you if you ride dirt bikes or something in a more of a dry area. I mean, obviously, I'm sure it's way worse in Ramadi, but same thing. When you breathe, you breathe it in.
It's just dirt.
Cough,
You're breathing in. You
out.
cough. It's going to come
everywhere.
out. Yep.
Yeah.
Blow your nose. It's just that.
That's just how it is over there. Just moon dust everywhere.
Good times.